Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Greg Sterling, and welcome to another LSA webinar. Today here with Cameron Peebles of inMarket, and we're going to be talking about location data, its predictive value, its psychographic value, and all the things that you can do with it. And he's got some great data and examples. But before we get into it, I'm going to do a little housekeeping and talk about some events that are coming up. So next slide, please. So there are our lovely pictures, and whenever I see that picture, I think I should get a different headshot. But there it is, and there's Cameron. Cameron, is that like a stained glass window that you're standing in front of?
It's actually on Abercrombie Boulevard here in Venice Beach, California. It's the most Instagrammed street in the U.S., evidently, and there's murals everywhere. So when we did our company pictures, we just went outside.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so for all of you listening today, we're going to send you the rebroadcast of this, the recording of this, tomorrow in an email. We'll also put it into a blog post. All the registrants will get that. Cameron also has a couple of reports, or a report that he'll tell you how to get a hold of, which will elaborate on some of the data. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can submit them, and then we'll get to them at the end. We'll have some time for Q&A. Okay, let's get on with it. Next slide, please. So for those that aren't aware, our annual conference, LSA18, is coming up in Chicago, and it's going to be a great event. The whole local ecosystem will be there. We'll be talking about small business issues, enterprise issues, social media search. There's an agency workshop. We'll have a small business workshop. It's going to be a great opportunity for networking, business development, great content, pretty diverse lineup of people. Next slide, please. This slide will give you, the forthcoming slide will just give you a taste of who's going to be there. I don't need to go into this in depth. There's more information at thelsa.org/LSA18. Next slide. Another event coming up in the fall in New York, September 13, is our Place Conference 2018. This is a brand and enterprise-focused event that's really about the same stuff that we're talking about here, location data and its many uses. And inMarket gave a great case study last year with a client, Proyo. And I won't replicate the case study, but it was terrific, and they contributed to a really successful event. So we'll hope to see everybody this forthcoming September in New York. Next slide. Oh, there's everybody that was there. Next slide. Okay, so I just have two really quick substantive slides before we get into Cameron's discussion. So for people that are not already aware of this, when we talked about location, we used to talk, and mobile location in particular, we really used to talk about geofences, radius from a point in space and time, a building, so a mile around, 2 miles around a store, conquesting, geofences around competitors. And that still goes on, certainly, and it's useful and effective in certain circumstances. But what's really happened in the last several years that's so exciting and interesting, and you've heard me talk about, and Cameron will be getting into, is the way in which location data has really evolved into something really expansive and versatile. It's now a really, people, it's already a cliche to call it a cookie for the real world, but that's kind of how it's being used in many respects. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of a list of the things that are going on. Location data can be used to segment and identify audiences, their buying behavior, their preferences. You can get competitive insights. What's your share of voice in terms of, or share of foot traffic versus competitors? Location can be used to contextualize or personalize experiences. Certainly, attribution is one of the core uses of offline location data, mobile location data, ad exposures to store visits. There's all kinds of performance benchmarking that can be done competitively or across locations within an organization. And then Cameron's going to get into this in greater detail. It can be used as a predictor, right? So you can look at this data and historical information and determine what earnings are going to be directionally, or whether somebody is headed for decline or bankruptcy. And I won't steal Cameron's thunder, but certainly that's the case with Toys R Us. So it's really a powerful tool that everybody needs to understand and understand the full range of things that can be done with location data now. So Cameron, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you guys have questions, feel free to submit them throughout the presentation. We'll get to them at the end, and I will come back to participate in that. But right now it's Cameron's show, so take it away.
Beautiful. Thank you for that great introduction, Greg. And yeah, we have a lot to get through today. The core of what we're talking about is how location data predicts retail closures, trends, and opportunities. But I think the bigger story with it, which Greg touched upon, is its evolution, both from an infrastructure perspective, from technology, et cetera, but from a strategy perspective on how we're pulling out different both insights on consumers, but then creating opportunities for engagement based on this. Let's get to the next slide. We're having a little, here we go. Just to give you guys a little context on who I am and who we are and how we're getting this data. inMarket, we are a very large consumer engagement platform, and we're integrated directly in around 50 million consumer phones throughout the U.S. So call it 1 in 4, 1 in 5 consumers have one of our SDKs integrated. And so what this enables us to do is see where they go in an anonymous but always on fashion. So because people don't live their lives in points, they live them in patterns. And we're actually able to see where consumers go throughout their day, how they're living their lives, when they get close to a point that there's an opportunity for a brand or an advertiser to engage with them. But even more than that, to build powerful audiences around them that enable, again, brands and agencies to transform advertising into something that is more like an offer or a valuable recommendation from a trusted friend. So I would invite you to go to the LSA site and to read a op-ed that I put in earlier this week. This is sort of going to frame a lot of the stuff that we're going into deeper dive on today. The title of it is Galvanizing Retail Digital Strategies That Can Save Brick and Mortar Stores. This convergence between digital and brick and mortar is happening in a really fascinating way on a day-to-day basis here. We see with Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods and a wide variety of other players out there, these strategies mixing between where they used to be completely separate. It used to be either or. Either I prefer to purchase this via e-commerce, or I prefer to go into a retailer to purchase these items. And so this convergence is both stirring up the pot and creating winners and losers, but also enabling strategies from one to be applied in the other. And I think a biggest thing that I go into here is identification of where consumer is, who they are, and where they are, and then reaching out to them, very similar to the strategies that have been working so well in e-commerce for 20-some years. So I invite you to go and review that. So just a little bit of framing on what we're going to talk about today. First, as a snazzy title, we put time machine in there. A lot of you are probably saying, what the heck does that mean? But we're going to go into a lot of detail on that in some predictions that we made throughout the year last year on retail closures, retail expansion, the metrics that we pulled from that, the strategies we used to predict them, and then the results coming from that. And that helps with that lens to look forward in a more powerful and actionable way to create, again, opportunities for both retail and CPG sold at retail to thrive in the new world environment. And primarily, and what we're going to end on is the way that location data can actually extend past just where somebody is into who they truly are. Demographic and psychographic profiles that are created from location data that are much more powerful and definitely much more actionable than others from what you would call more traditional data sources. So first of all, let's get into the time machine section. Again, to give you a little more framing on this, this entire data set is part of our inMarket Insights program. And as CMO of the company, I'm lucky enough to run this and to be able to take our amazing database engineers and our amazing platform and see what we can quantify and what visibility we can give our brands and agencies in how consumers are living their lives that was never before possible. So we're seeing instances just over the last year or two of visibility that answers questions from 4, 5, 6 years ago, even a couple decades ago, on how consumers relate and respond to changes within the retail environment. And yes, this is sunny Southern California where we are. No, our office isn't right there. This is downtown. We're, like I said before, we're in Venice Beach. We also have offices in New York, Chicago, and Bentonville, Arkansas. And we'd be more happy to talk to you guys if you're close to one of those locations. But let's get into the content here. So again, going back a little bit, talking about this time machine, the first time we really kicked the tires on this strategy was in a insight report we put out on spring 2017 retail loyalty. This was released after spring. It was in the summer, so that it is on the data from spring 2017. So, and a little bit of housekeeping here. You say loyalty. How can you? Are you reading a consumer's mind, or are you violating some sort of privacy or anything like that? No, we're defining loyalty, and we found this is very actionable for the physical world. Loyalty is the number of times that a shopper, defined as someone that has shopped at least once, visits a retail establishment in a 1-month period. So this takes into account that somebody is a shopper or is not. Right? You can't have, it has nothing to do with the volume of foot traffic going to a location, because different businesses are built out from a size and a number of associates level to deal with a certain level of volume, right? A foot traffic volume that would make a shoe store the most, the most profitable shoe store in the world would bankrupt a Lowe's or a Home Depot, because there wouldn't be enough people. So what this is somebody saying, I choose to visit this location, and how often do I return? So we rank them for the top 10 and bottom 10. And if we look down through here, Walmart leading the pack with nearly 3 visits per month, Fry's Electronics, Dollar General, Fred Meyer Jewelers, Target, Family Dollar, 99-cent store, Dollar Tree, Home Depot, and Lowe's, which we just mentioned. There's a lot of similarity between a lot of these groups, and of course there's a category similarity, but there's also a strategy similarity. Walmart, is the discount leader. They carry everything under the sun, and they want to be everything for you, but at a really great price for your family. Truly understanding the modern American family, what their demands are, what their requirements are. And then as we see down here too, emerging leaders like 99-cent store and Dollar Tree, that category, the very low discount category, is of course growing within the U.S., but these are businesses that we see really, really understand their consumer base. They understand their neighborhoods and their role within them. And when we saw this, then we did a search out for plans to open new stores or close new stores. What we see is the ones in green here have plans to open new stores, had planned throughout the year to open stores per multiple sources, or do renovations. So we said, what would it look like with the opposite of this? So we looked at the bottom 10, and this is not out of 20, this is many hundreds of retailers throughout the U.S., and we saw within a category of clothing or legacy businesses that are mostly going to e-commerce, but even more than that, we were able to see within the category American Eagle Outfitters, H&M, Gap, BB, Wet Seal, Crocs in there. All of them, and Toys R Us as well, had either announced that they were closing stores, halting growth, or doing major layoffs from third-party sources. So what we're seeing here, and we saw it throughout the entire list, a wide variety of this, but it all stuck to this, that loyalty or foot traffic through the door and the volume that consumers choose to vote with their feet and enter in that store, that they're going to continue with that business, is a way to predict the health of said business. So then we said, well, what's up with 9 West? Because 9 West is, in to a good amount, the lowest loyalty of any retailer in the U.S. And we released a report. CNBC picked up on this, and we literally made a projection that 9 West was going to go out of business, or at least begin extreme contraction. Then we began seeing barometers for this, that they might be closing. This is all June and July of last year, by the way. And then as of this year, 9 West finally went into full bankruptcy. So it proves at least potential causality from that location data, even more than financial data or other types of data set used within a methodology of loyalty can prove retail closures and actually predict how this convergence of retail and e-commerce is evolving into the future. So let's go back to look at our bottom list, and the one that really stuck out and is obviously in the news a lot lately is Toys R Us. So we looked into Toys R Us, and I'm going to play a short video for you here. The audio is a little bit loud in testing, so forewarning you guys not to blow your speakers out. But Toys R Us made one last shot to really engage their consumers using what isn't even an established digital strategy, but is a very forward-looking strategy of augmented reality. This was very well publicized. It was also backed up with I believe, from my sources, $5 to $6 million broadcast TV buy, all to support this. And I'm going to play this video for you now.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey. Toys R Us, which recently filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, wants shoppers to grab their smartphones and head to the store. The toy giant is debuting a new augmented reality experience that will allow young shoppers to use an app to unlock activities. Each activity allows you to rack up stars, and the more you earn, the more experiences you can tap into. Just point your tablet or smartphone at the sticker on the floor and watch a toy come to life. In the virtual fishing pond, click on the line and catch a shark, a whale, or maybe a top hat. Later, you can scroll through your catch and share it with your friends online. Next, young shoppers can adopt a baby doll, give it a name, and then perform tasks ranging from feeding to changing a dirty diaper. Once the child gets home, he or she can continue to play with the animated baby online. In the aisle filled with remote-controlled cars, pint-sized drivers can steer a truck around a track gathering points, with the actual toys visible in the background of their tablet or smartphone screen. Next up, the Animal Planet section. Click on your screen and open a window into an animated safari full of the lions, giraffes, or other collectible animals that fill the shelves. In the basketball station, you can shoot the ball by just moving your finger, and you don't have to play alone. There's even a leaderboard showing how you compare to other players throughout the country, as well as those who played at the same store. It's not just about having fun. The retailer hopes that these new activities will boost the number of shopping trips and ultimately increase sales.
Cool. So let me make sure.
Hi, Hi.
There we go. Sorry about that, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that little break in there. So obviously this was fodder for us to go and say, especially with them dangling out there, that they're looking for additional foot traffic. Very much obviously in our wheelhouse. And so we've used our resources to say, how is this working for Toys R Us? Can augmented reality really save the store? So what we did was run a foot traffic analysis of overall foot traffic, a share of their visits over time, right? Because if this was going to create an increase in foot traffic, we would see a spike. And this is an easy way that we use to graph this out. We see the average before the launch of AR. We do see that trickle down too, which is really interesting because that's the core of what's wrong with their business, that foot traffic is continuing to decrease. Then we see the AR launch on 10/21. 1 week after, we do see a spike. 2 weeks after, maybe a little bit. 3 weeks after, a big deep, their lowest foot traffic ever. And then the 4 weeks after, it's Black Friday. So that's shooting in the barrel. So we can go into a little more detail, I believe, on the next slide. Here we go. So this is, you can see even day by day traffic throughout the week. We do see the biggest spike and the biggest that they receive, other than Black Friday, on the weekend following their main launch. The news had gotten out, the broadcast TVs had gone out, different things like that. We see a spike, but does the small spike re-engage shoppers to make Toys R Us part of their toy purchasing habits? So what we see here is, and we all know how this movie ends, no, it didn't work. They're closing all of their stores, and I think a lot of kids got their wish list really early for Christmas this year. It didn't work. It didn't save this company. And so we're thinking, well, why is that? It's a forward-thinking digital strategy implemented at retail. So we looked into this a little bit more, and it really reconfirmed that the tried and true tested elements of digital strategies is the important part. Because with Jeff Bezos going in and buying Whole Foods, you don't see him launching augmented reality there, right? You see him implementing strategies that have worked for him. So the biggest thing with Toys R Us augmented reality is you need the app, right? The broadcast TV buy talked about the Toys R Us app. We did a search for the Toys R Us app, and we saw a few very, very interesting things. This is a screenshot actually from my phone. Obviously, I have an Android. The app you're supposed to get is the fourth one there, Play Chaser, Toys R Us, right? There are things before that say Toys R Us more clearly, including the Chinese Toys R Us for whatever reason. This is for the techies in there in the app people. This is called App Store optimization. When people are searching for your app, it actually comes up. So obviously they hadn't done anything with that. Zero sync with their promotions, which was that $5-6 million broadcast media buy, because they said the Toys R Us AR app, when this is called Play Chaser, and people likely wouldn't see the small Toys R Us below that. And obviously zero targeting, because they should have been able to target people right in the source. The biggest thing by far is that Walmart, up at the top, that is a paid ad that Walmart did for people searching for Toys R Us, which means that likely more people downloaded the Walmart app than downloaded Play Chaser. They wouldn't have known what that is based on that. And Walmart, using tried and true digital strategies at retail, now for pennies on the dollar for just this AdWords buy, was able to get the traffic in search that Toys R Us had paid $5-6 million for. So it reconfirmed that it's not that the digital strategies or the most forward-thinking digital strategies are the things that can save retail. It's the tried and true and the very simple things that are going through. So I'm going to get in here, and I love this picture. It's a fun apocalypse picture, because a lot of people think about this when they think of retail. And this may be all bad news that you feel like I'm giving you guys out there for those who live in the retail or CPG space, and I promise you it's not that. I want to do this comparison here. So prediction in the late 90s, early 2000s, et cetera, is that digital was going to completely kill the music industry. The truth is, music sales were up by 11.4% in 2016 as streaming takes over. And in addition to that is that streaming is growing at 50% per year, to such a point that the biggest player in the space, Spotify, is announcing an IPO very soon. So very clearly there are ways for embracing digital strategies to save retail. And everything we're looking at is that the secret to surviving in a digital-first world for retail and for CPG at retail is embracing the tried and true digital strategies. And I'm going to point out again, and I'm going to pull this back up for the top 10 retailers based on customer loyalty. Who's at top there? Walmart. For many, many reasons, obviously. But I have to think that the savviness in order to place that ad for people searching for Toys R Us is something that gives them their advantage throughout everything that they do. Wrong direction. So, methodology. So we're going to go into a little bit of some technical terms here. I'm not going to go too far, but there are some things and discussions that are becoming part of every discussion, or around the board table, as well as the pitch table at agencies and brands. It's very important to understand. Got a little lag here. Oh, okay, so. Location, just like Greg had said before, used to be, very simply, is somebody around something. But what we found through our data analysis and building this platform is that it's not nearly enough to identify audiences or launch campaigns based on just how close they are to something like that, somebody else. Because in this example, you see a brand that's looking to target gym goers, fitness lovers, people that respect their bodies, but it just happens to be next to a fast food restaurant. And so by not truly targeting the edges of the boundaries of these locations and really thinking about the strategies within here, you actually do more harm than good. So a few things that go into the data sets are, well, first with this slide, we're going to go over the different data types. And again, I promise this isn't going to get too in the weeds and it's going to be actionable. The best ones, and this is, you don't have to believe me, this is by the MRC guidelines. It was a great guide that was put out last year. GPS, beacon, and Wi-Fi. These are the data sources that enable you to precisely target where somebody is. This is how Uber knows to pick you up right on the corner through there. And this is how, for instance, with our platform, we can tell if somebody's going into a store versus coming out of a store. Very important from a timing and messaging point of view, and from an analytics point of view. Other data sources out there that are commonly used, especially when you get into programmatic data sales, are IP address and cell tower triangulation. IP address is literally just like it sounds. IP address is roughly within a few different blocks, or sometimes even a larger region. And cell phone triangulation is literally which cell phone are you closest to. So it could be within several miles, depending on line of sight. And these are things that are going to be packaged up for you guys doing any kind of program within location. And it's important to talk to your vendor and ask them very simply, what sources of data are you using? Are you using GPS, beacon, Wi-Fi, or IP address and cell tower triangulation? So now we're going to go a little bit deeper, and I promise not to get too technical, but SDK, and this is becoming something that is discussed in the boardrooms now, even at brands. And a lot of people think it's sort of ubiquitous that there's just one type of SDK data. SDK stands for Software Development Kit. It is that thing that enables the platform to plug into the app that then transmits the user's location. So that being said, what happens to that data afterwards? So a first-party SDK connection means that the vendor for the data or the plan that you're looking for has a direct integration into that app, that it is their publisher, either an owned app or a publisher partner that is monetizing with them, that enables a direct connection there. It is the way to prove that the data and it is coming from a certain data source, but also B is this is where that person is now, or this is where they were yesterday at 2:30 p.m. Those sort of things. The programmatic ecosystem for data is becoming much more attractive for users because it enables extremely large scales. A lot of vendors will say 2 or 3 billion users that we're tracking right now, but the only way to do that, and if you ask them, they will admit to you that it's third-party SDK data. So this is somebody literally buying location data from through the programmatic ecosphere, and there's no way to track validation for where the data came from, how old it is, and all the pieces within there. So we get wildly inaccurate results from this, and you can just see here, and this is a conservative example of all the different hands that data can go through in order to get to a vendor to do a campaign. So this is maybe a little bit easier way to look at this in a very simple graph from left to right. The less sources that data goes through decreases the potential for fraud, obviously, and the mobile industry is wrought with fraud. Some examples cite around 15 to 20% of all data and transactions through the mobile ecosphere are fraudulent, right? And that obviously grows when you trade off through hands. With first-party data, then you're dealing with one vendor, a direct connection, it's virtually zero. The ability to create audiences decreases as you go out, simply because if you want to get extremely granular, you want not just fitness enthusiasts, but people that go to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a week and then you want to message them when they get into the door of a Rouse. Well, you better make sure that that data is extremely accurate and find that at scale. And it's harder to do that with third-party SDK integration. And along with that, the accuracy confidence level, which is something statisticians talk about, decreases dramatically when dealing with third-party SDK data. So this is sort of a simple kind of takeaway. And again, it'll be in the slide notes for how to think of first-party versus third-party SDK data. First-party, highest quality, lowest fraud, and best performance. Third-party SDK, lowest quality, highest fraud, lowest performance. So here's some additional takeaway questions you can have that just very simply, without becoming a mobile engineer, that you can ask vendors from a campaign point of view, and they should very easily be able to answer for you guys. What percentage of your data comes from first-party SDK integrations? Where did the remainder originate? Can you identify all of the parties that your data has passed through, and who validates the accuracy of your data? So now we're going to go into a little more detail on opportunities to create psychographic levels, profiles based on location. So some very high-level stuff, and again, I don't want to go too deep into this because it literally is Pandora's Box. I get to geek out and find out new stuff about people all day long, but we're going to go over just the generations of consumers and where they visit, just even from a retail point of view, can showcase a lot about them. We'll start out with Gen Z. So we dub the Gen Z the fashion and adventure generation. So number 1 in retail is UGG, number 2 North Face, number 3 Payless, number 4 Vans, and number 5 GameStop. And this is from a retail point of view. Then you look at QSRs and you look at, this fun kind of characteristics carrying through here. But then even more than that, when you look down into finance level, then you're looking at people that in each one of these actively cater and try to acquire new users when they're first coming into the consumer base, so to speak. From here, we'll turn on to Millennials, who for forever was the only generation that any kind of advertisers were looking for. They have awesome beards. They have really cool sweaters. They have boots, and they kick up their feet up in the air. But I think there's a big saying that Millennials are just people now. They have kids and have grown up, graduated from school, and have real jobs and stuff like that. But they definitely retain those beards. So moving on from here. We're talking about frugality here. So, and this is confirmed with a lot of different sources, but we can get very granular with Millennials. Number 1 power ranking for retail is Ross. Number 2, Rainbow, then Burlington, Da Vinci, and IKEA. And not to go into too much detail on here, but I do want to point out grocery and pharmacy, because they index extremely much higher for Food for Less, 99-cent store. And you saw those on the report that we had earlier about loyalty. So it seems that obviously we've confirmed the frugality of the generation. There's a lot of reasons behind that. Lots of studies have shown that millennials are making less than their older counterparts, that they have large student loans to pay off, different things like that. But it's definitely confirming it with the retail locations that they go to, because again, consumers vote with their feet. So moving on to Gen X, my generation. Now, consumers have evolved just a little bit. So we dub this the home and family. So they've got a little bit of excess income. They're buying for their family. Some fun elements in here. Olympia Sports, Tractor Supply Company, that kind of surprised us, but it was actually a large Midwest chain. But a few things in here: Friendly's, Bob Evans. These are like comfort foods that people grew up on, and now they're taking their families to. And then you have finance. You have larger, more established banks: Citizens Bank, Huntington, M&T Bank, Key Bank. And again, these banks have actively courted this generation as well. Now we move on to baby boomers here. So we've got, and a lot of this gets a little bit funny, but number 1, this made me laugh when we saw for retail, Yankee Candle. Home Depot, right? Because they're potentially retired and they're working around the house. New Balance, best shoe for the older guys who want to keep active. But then going to QSR, Dunkin' Donuts, and DQ. We see a lot of causality, but also factor with grocery. Publix, obviously, I'm from Miami originally, so Florida, They pretty much dominate there. But Costco and Walgreens and CVS for picking up prescriptions. So, and again, this is just sort of getting into the beginnings of the psychographic level that we can dig into when we see where people go, we see into the activities that power their lives, what really motivates them, and then we can go down from here. So some fun stuff I wanted to add on to the end of this before we get to Q&A. And just two really fun examples at the end. But to answer something that was unanswerable in years past, how long do people stick with their New Year's resolution? So what we actually did, we picked the biggest one, which is I'm going to go to the gym more. And we created a graph for new gym foot traffic visitations. We actually saw here that it takes around 4 months for people to drop off on their New Year's resolutions, and then we see them getting active over the summer. Strangely, we see a not small but big spike in October, potentially getting ready for the holiday season, and then completely drop off towards the end of the year, and we see this repeat again year after year. Very interesting. With this, I've got a URL up here if you guys want to see more info on our Insights program, inMarket.com/insights. There's a lot there. There's 20, 30 different reports, and I didn't want to pick one over the other, so please feel free to go there. And my personal email here, Cameron@inMarket.com, if you would like to have more questions, or if you wanted to go into more detail on anything, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.